Hello, this is Kia from XenForo. In this video, we're going to take a break from the front-end stuff and move into the admin control panel to work with some tools there. And we'll end up implementing a filterer, which is a new feature that debuted with XenForo 2.2. So let's head over there now and see where we're going to start. You can see that here under the content section, I've got three new navigation items: notes, list notes, and search notes. And they are going to pull through a list of notes, which of course is a slightly strange thing to do. We wouldn't traditionally reflect front-end content in the control panel like this, but for the sake of the demo, that's exactly what we're going to do. So let's talk quickly about how we've got this set up, because most of the concepts that we need here we have already dealt with in previous videos, but let's just whiz through. I'm going to head into development, and the first thing I need is a root. You'll remember that we created a notes root for the front end, and it had a format of notes with an integer collected from note ID and title, and then a page item. For the admin section, I'm also creating a notes root. Let's go take a look at it. Here it is. It's largely the same, except I haven't got that page part of the root in it for reasons. And I've got a section context of notes, which is going to refer back to the item I created in this content section, and then it points to demopad note, which is an admin controller rather than the pub controller note. It's now admin controller note. So that's all fine. Now let's move on to admin navigation, and I have created within the content section notes, list notes, and search notes, and you can see that this notes has a navigation ID of notes, which corresponds to what we had on the root just now. It's a higher display order than all the other top level items. Then we've got list notes, which goes to just a link of notes. Therefore, it will correspond to action index in the controller, and notes search, which corresponds to action search. Only other things to note here, would be that we've got this little gadget here, which is a font awesome icon class, and by specifying a font awesome item there, then we get a sort of a background image to our notes section here. So that's all fine. Let's go and take a look at the actual controller. We've got a pre-dispatch controller just in case we wanted to use that, but because we specified notes as our section context in the root route, we don't actually need that, but I've left it in there for your reference and information. Then we've got an action index and an action note and an action search, which we'll look at in due course, but we'll talk about action index first. So when we hit action index, if a note ID appears as part of the parameter bag, then we will reroute to the specific note action. If not, then we'll set the section context to notes list, namely the item that is highlighted here. Then we will filter the page. Now this is different from the way that we did it on the front end, because on the front end we included the page parameter as part of the root format, but for the which was here, pages, params page. But for the control panel, just to show you the different way to do it, which you can refer back to in the pagination video, we're using filter page to take something from the query string that is called page and assign it to the page value. Then we've got the number of items per page. Then we come into the note finder. We set a default order of post date in a descending order, and then we limit it by page. Then we pass out the collection of notes, the total notes without the pagination, the current page, number of items per page, and then the view class with the appropriate templates, which I've created over here. Let's whiz through this really fast. I've got a quick filter macro, I've got a data list, and then within the data list, we for each the notes, we make a data row for each one. We've got a cell that contains the avatar, a main cell that contains a label that has the note title, a hint with some tag stuff, and an explain that goes on the second row that has a bulleted inline list that contains the username, post date, and the reactions, and finally a delete control. And at the very bottom, we've got a page nav. Most of that will be familiar to anyone who's followed this video series from the beginning, but let's go and take a quick look at what that actually looks like. Here it is. So we've got the avatar cell, the title in the label, some tags, the username of the person who posted it, the date it was posted, and then if there are any reactions, then there they are. Few things to note. This macro template is not one that ships by default. I've just made that, but it essentially follows the same principles as the public tag macros list. So just adapt your own if you want to do this. And finally, I should note that this clicking on this doesn't actually do anything. I haven't done any work for action note, and the same goes for delete. So those are left for you to do something with if you want to. So let's move on. A quick look at that filterer thing. Back up here, we've got this very simple single line, or 3 lines if you include the block out a bit here, that brings in this quick filter. If I type into here, then it will filter down to any content within the list on the current page, that is, that contains the text that I've added there. Let's say something that's a bit less common. Actually, there is actually highlighted in all of those. Or I could specify that it's only for a prefix. Let's make a prefix of this, and there we go. And then we can clear that out. So that's what you get with the very default quick filter there. There are some pages within the control panel that do a much more complicated job with that, like the template search and the thread search, phrase search, which actually search the entire range of content. There is one thing we need to attend to quickly, both on the admin page here and on the front end, which is a performance issue. If we scroll down to the bottom of this page and take a look at the debug info, which we can get to by clicking on the timer here, you can see that there are 27 queries, in fact 28 on this debug page being executed. And if we scroll down, we can find out what those are. Here's the query that fetches all of our notes, and there's the one that counts the notes. And then after that, we've got a query against reaction content, and a query against reaction content, and another query against reaction content. And actually, every single post, every single note that's on that page is generating its own reaction content query in order to fetch the reactions for that particular item. Really, it shouldn't be doing that. We should be telling the system that we want to fetch reactions for each note when we get the notes. So how do we do that? Well, by default, we don't do it. We've just got the note finder and we're just pulling out the notes themselves. But we do have the user information coming back without having to do an extra query. And the reason for that is because we have a default with of user, which is the same as saying with user each time you use the finder. But we don't have a default with on reactions, so we're going to need to specifically say that we want to get reactions here. So you might think that it would be as simple as with reactions, and it sort of is, but we actually want to get a very specific join to the reaction system because we need the reactions that are specific to me so that I can get this you and Mr. Spammer stuff. And the way we do that is we will add an extra qualifier here. So we're going to reactions pipe, and then we're going to give it the XF visitor user ID. And so that, in my case, is going to end up with reactions pipe 1 being my user ID. And that will give us the reactions specific to from my perspective. So having put that in, let's go and refresh this page. And we should see that now we're down to 7 queries. And the reason for that is that if we come down to the demo pad note query, we've now got reaction content included and joined in, and then no additional queries to run on there. So let's do the same on the front end. We've currently got 15 queries. So let's just take that join from here and go into the front end, find the Finder, here it is, add the join, and then refresh again, and our queries go down to 7. So that's a quick optimization to make sure that we're not doing n+1 queries for reactions on these pages. When I talk about a filterer, I'm talking about the ability to narrow down the content that's shown in my list. There are a handful of filters already implemented in XenForo 2.2, one of which is attached to the phrase list. So you'll know that a filterer is in place because you'll see this blue bar at the top of a list, and then there'll be some kind of menu gadget here to allow you to refine the content that's shown. So let's refine the search to anything that contains 1_, and we'll refine the search, and here we go. Now we get a little gadget over the top here that says the title contains 1_, and we have got stuff that contains 1_, and if I want to return to the unfiltered list, I can get rid of that, and I can add as many filters as I want. So let's go and build one of those for our demo pad system. So we're going to start on here, and I should show you this search form that I've also built. It's very basic. Let's go and take a look at the actual code. There's only a few things to point out with it, one of which is that I'm not passing through individual variables for each of these fields. I'm using a variable I've called q, and then each one of those is an array key of q. So I've got the q title, q user, q tags, and the value of that comes from page params title, page params user, and all of that will become clear a bit later. The only other thing to point out is that I'm not necessarily using variable names that correspond directly to what's in the database. So here, where I'm querying the state of the demo pad note, the database field is called message state, but I'm just using state. And the reason for that is that these are going to be passed through get when we switch between pages. And so if I have a very long variable name, I could potentially reach the limit of what is available through get and a URL. So I've just shortened those slightly. It also makes it a bit more readable. And the other one of those that I've done is this date inputs here, where I've used start and end. Those are actually going to be referring to the post date, but I want to have some sort of between thing. So post date is between this and this. So let's go and build a filterer. The first thing we need to do is head over to our add-on, and within the add-on structure, I want a new directory. I'm going to call it filterer. I keep on typing filterer, but for now that will do fine. And I want a new PHP class called note, and it's going to extend the abstract filterer from XF. Let's hit OK on that. I don't want to add that to Git just yet. And let's see what we've got. We've got some abstract methods that we need to go ahead and fill in some content. And I'm going to simplify the fully qualified name by using that. And then let's start to work on what's actually here. So the first thing it needs is a finder type, and we've worked on this kind of thing before. We're just going to say it is a return demo pad : note, and essentially that's the name of the entity that we're going to be filtering against. So very straightforward for that. The filter type map is kind of a shortcut to using the input filterer. So we're going to specify here all the things that we're expecting to filter by and how we should clean up their input. So let's put this into the other window here and keep demopad note search open over there so we can see what we're doing. And then let's set up the filter. So it's going to be return an array. We can see that it's an array because it's defined there. So we've got title, and the title is a string. We've got user, which is also a string. You're going to notice a pattern here soon. We've got tags, which actually in this case at the moment is also a string. Then we've got the state, which, let's just check the values. They are nothing visible or hidden. So again, that is a string. And finally, we've got start and end here, and they are going to come through as date time. So we'll have start is date time, and so is end. Finish that off. And so this tells the filterer all the things that are going to come through that it needs to be inspecting. The next thing is the LookupTypeList, but we're going to come back to that later. So at the moment, I'm just going to return an empty array there so that it says that I've got some content. And now we get into the interesting bit, namely applyFilter. Now, what applyFilter actually does is it will selectively add where clauses to the finder that we have set up here. But in this particular case, we can't take the standard finder as defined by the filterer and just pass this, because we need some extra stuff. Because let's remember that when we set up the note finder here, we wanted it with reactions and we wanted a default order. So let's go and set that up. We'll head back to the filterer, and there is a function that we can extend that has all of this stuff in it. So if we just go up to the abstract filterer, there is a method called initFinder. So I'm going to have a copy of that and plop it somewhere in here. And then we'll do some work to actually set up the finder as we want it. So we're going to say that the finder is with user. Strictly speaking, we don't need that because it's a default with on this particular entity. But I'm going to put it in there just so that we know that it's coming through for if anyone looks at this casually. We're going to have it with reactions. So I'm going to just pull that straight out of here. In fact, we're going to have both of those. So we're going to have with user, with reactions according to the visitor's perspective, and it's going to have a default order of post date in descending order. You can see that the finder is a class and it's passed by reference by default. So just doing that will be fine. It will refer to the finder outside of the scope of this method. So now that we've got that, we can head over to the applyFilter and start working with it. Now, what happens is that as the filter starts to work, it will pass in each one of these filtered items to applyFilter one at a time, and then ask, well, what do you want to do with the data that's been given to you? And we're going to handle that with a switch statement and say, if you're this kind of filter, then do something with it or not. So let's start with the switch, and we're going to switch on filter name. By default, we're going to return false. So let's just put that in first. Because if we get a filter that we don't understand, or we don't want to handle it explicitly, we'll just return false and it won't be applied to the filter. So now let's deal with the ones that we do want. So we can come back to DemoPad Note Search to refer to what we're getting through here. Let's just extend the size of that up a little bit. And we'll deal with these in turn. So the first filter is on title. So case title. What do we want to do if we get a title? Well, what we're going to do is we're just going to very basically say any item that has the submitted text within the title should be a match for the filter. And that's very straightforward. We're just going to say this finder, namely the one that we set up here, where, and then the field that we want to query, its title. What do we want to do with it? We want to say it's like, and then we need to filter the incoming text suitable for like. So let's do that on the previous line. Let's call it value like equals this finder escape like, and we're going to escape value, and we're going to put wildcards at both the front and the end of the string. So we do that by doing %, question mark, %. The question mark represents the text that we've got, and the percents are the wildcards. And then we can just use that value like in there. And once we've attached that, we can return true. So we don't want to carry on with our switch. We don't want to do anything else with that data. If the filter name has come through as title, this is all we need. So now we can move on to the next one. Now this one is a lot more interesting because it's allowing us to do something a bit more exciting. And the thing I want to do is I want to not just strictly match against one field. I'm going to say, depending on what data has been submitted, do different things. So let's have a look at this. If is numeric value. Namely, even if it's a string, if it looks like a number, let's assume that it is a number and treat it as a number. And the importance of numbers with users is they could refer to user IDs. So if it's numeric, then let's say this finder where user.user ID, referring here, of course, to the user relation on the note. Here it is. So if the user ID corresponds exactly to value, so we're not going to try and do wildcard matching it against an integer. That would be nonsense. But if we've got an integer value, pass it in as a potential user ID and return true. This looks good. So if it's a number, treat it as a user ID and try to match that. If it's not numeric, then let's do other stuff with it. So let's do another one of these value likes, because that's useful. And now we're going to see what we can match against. Well, the standard fields that you want to match against with a user might be the username and the email address. So let's put those in as joint conditions and see where we get. So this finder where or, and then we've got an array of the conditions. So the conditions are either user.username equals, no, not equals, like value like, or user.email like value like. And assuming that we've got those, we will again return true to say that this filter has applied something, and so therefore we need to refer back to it later on. So quick recap: if the filter comes through as a title, then we will escape it so that we've got wildcards at either side, and we will say if the note title contains that text, then return true, or at least we've added that condition anyway. If we come through with the user, then if the value of the filter text is a number, then try to use it as the user ID and do an exact match. Otherwise, treat it as text, put wildcard either side, and say that you want to match either username or against email. All right, what's next? The next one is the tags. Now, tags are a bit more difficult, but I'm just going to rattle through here. And hopefully you'll follow. But essentially, first of all, we want to get the tag repository. So tag repo equals this app repository XF tag. And then let's help ourselves out with some PHP doc here. It's an XF repository tag. So now we should get code completion. And then we'll get the tags. Tags equals tag repo split the tag list for the incoming value, which is how that token input is going to provide it. It's going to be essentially a comma separated list. So this split tag list will intercept that and turn it into something we can work with. And then if we've actually got any tags, then we will start to get the valid ones and then see which ones are valid, not found, etc., etc. So let's see if we've got valid tags first. Valid tags equals tag repo get tags based on the tags that we've found there. And we've also got this not found variable that will get populated if any of the tags that we have specified or that have been specified don't actually exist. So let's see if we get that. If not found, then what do we do with those? Well, we'll say this finder where impossible. Namely, those tags don't exist, so we can't possibly add them to our filter. So if we don't have a not found, then let's do for each the array keys of the valid tags, which we fetched here as tag ID. So essentially we're taking all the valid tags and then looping through their IDs. And with each of those, we're going to do this finder with, and this is very similar to what we did with reactions, where we specified a specific user to join on, but this time we're going to do tags piped into this particular tag ID. So we'll add on the tag ID and pass in true as must exist. And once we've got to the end of that loop just here, then we will return true. So I hope you mostly followed that code there, but essentially what we're doing here is saying if you've got if tags are specified, make sure they exist, and if they do, add them to our filter. Moving on, now we've got state. Now state corresponds, as I said before, to message state, but we also have, if we quickly go back to the actual form itself, the ability to say any. So if we get that any through, we don't want to filter, and the any value is nothing. So let's make sure that we treat that as nothing and do nothing with it. So if value is nothing, an empty string, which is what it would be, then just return false. Don't do anything else with it. We don't want to filter. But if it isn't, then this finder where message state equals, I'm putting the equals in here, by the way, just for the sake of clarity, but actually you don't need the equals, so I'll leave it in there for now anyway, where the message state is equal to the value, and then we'll return true. Not for true, but true. There we go. And finally, we have got the start and end, where we want to filter based on the post date. So let's the code for those is going to be very similar. So let's put them both in the same thing and then do some slightly different things within. So case start or case end, then do this stuff. Let's get those back in. Get up. Right, there we are. So again, if I have no value coming through because I haven't specified one, then I want to do something else completely. So let's just pull that back slightly. So if the value is empty, let's just do it if not value, then return false for each one of those. Otherwise, if the filter name is start, then the filter we want is this finder where post date is greater than or equal to, because we've said it's between the value. And if it's not start and we've got this far, then it must be end. So let's just use an else. This finder where post date is less than value. So that should be fairly self-explanatory. And then we've just got one more thing to do. The value that's going to come through here is going to be a Unix timestamp, and that's going to be very unfriendly to show that to your end users as a filter parameter. So let's show them what they expect, namely the formatted date. So we're going to do, if we pop back up here and see here, we've got display value passed by reference. And by default, the display value is the same as value, but we can specify something else if we need to. So in this case, I'm going to say that the display value is equal to this app language date. So this is how to get a formatted date based on value. And then we're going to return true. Now, just before we head off to the template to go and put in the necessary changes to allow the filter to work, we've got to go and make some changes to the controller so that we actually get this thing to run. So let's head over to the controller now, and we'll start off by getting rid of this note finder because we don't need it anymore. We're going to be using the filterer. So what we're going to do, I think, is we will have a new method down here to allow us to set up the filterer wherever we need it. So we'll have a protected function setup note filterer, and it's going to return a demo pad note filterer note. And what's it going to do? Well, first of all, we're going to actually create the filterer. So filterer equals this app filterer. And now we essentially just need to use the shortcut like we do for finders and entities and stuff like that. So it's a demo pad, demo pad colon note. And this filterer factory will work out that that actually means the note filterer. So we've got that. Let's add some PHP docs so that that also becomes easy for us. It is a demo pad no filterer note. Now we should get code completion. Now we need to add some filters so that the stuff that comes from the search form does in fact get passed into the filterer. So we'll say filterer add filters, and we're going to add two separate filters. First of all, we're going to pass in as the first argument the filtered version. This is using the standard controller filterer, the filtered version of Q, namely what we're passing in here, and that is of type of array. And then we've got this other one, strictly speaking, this doesn't have to be called what I'm calling it here, but it's kind of just a convention that we've fallen into. If you use the default templates, then this is the variable that's going to be used. So just about every time you see a filter, it will use this variable. And it's used to allow you to turn off one particular filter without having to start the whole thing again from scratch. And it just looks like this filter, and then we've called it underscore skip filter in camel case, and that is also a string. So what that does is, if we pass through, let's say we've got title and user and tags in our filter, if we get a skip filter of tags, then it will ignore the fact that tags has come through the filter in queue and remove it from subsequent pages. So that's about it. And then we just return the filterer. So now we can reuse that anytime we need to. And then we've got to actually call that in the controller. So first of all, we'll say that the note filterer is this setup the note filterer, and then we'll get the finder out of that by using note filterer apply, and apply does essentially all the work to actually build the finder with the conditions that the filterer has built. We're almost done in the controller. We just need to pass through a collection of extra things. So let's first of all, let's just have the filter by page, what's it called? Limit by page of page and per page, because that's not handled by the filterer, that's just something else. So then we go back into note filter fetch and total, so that's good. And finally, we need to pass through the parameters that the filterer has. Params. Need to pass the parameters that the filterer has been working with, so that subsequent pages can do the same thing. If we switch to page 2, for example, and we're going to assign that to the variable q, and that will be the note filterer get link params. And we also need to get the data to build the kind of the visual list of what filters have been used, and those are the filter displays. So we'll say filter display is the note filterer get display values. And you'll recall that while we were working here, we actually had a specific display value that we set there. So that's where this comes in. So here is the demo pad note list template, and I want to insert my filter bar just inside the block container, but before the block body. And we're going to be calling the filter bar filter macro. So it's going to be an ffxf macro, name equals filter macros, comes from the same template as this, but this time it is the filter bar. And now we've got a few arguments to give it so that it knows what it's doing. So we need to give it a root so that it knows where it should be clicking, where each of the links should go, and the root is where we currently are, namely notes. Then we need to tell it what the params are, and the params are the page params that we've passed through as part of our view params earlier on. Then we need to tell it what our display values is. And then a little bit of magic here. We can actually tell it what our menu is, and for that we're just going to give it our search form. So the menu is it's the root to the search form, so it's notes/search. Now we can actually leave it at that, and it will work. But there's some fine tuning we need to do, which I'll talk about after we've had a look at this working. So if I refresh that now, then there's our filter bar, and we should be able to start filtering. So let's do anything with actually in the title. And here we go. It has filtered those, but we don't actually seem to have it showing anything in the filter bar. So have we messed that up? Yes, we have. It's not display values. It was called, if we come back to here, it was filter display. That's why that's not working. So we'll just give it filter display instead and refresh that. We should get the right thing. Here we are. The title contains actually. Let's do another refinement. Let's say that the user is admin. This is the building with XenForo equivalent of a reshoot, because when I was assembling this video, I realized I hadn't actually made the necessary changes to the controller's search action to get the page params variable that we need to get the values into the form. So let's do that now very quickly, and then I'll drop you back into the pre-recorded stuff. So here is the search action. We've got not much going on. We set the section context, and then we pass off an empty view params array into the demopad note search template. But what we need is we need to get the page params out of the filterer. And to do that, we're going to start off by declaring that we want to work with the page params, and then we're going to start up the filterer using the method we used earlier. So this setup note filterer, and then from that, there he is already, get filters for form gets everything that we need pre-formatted, ready for display in the form. So we'll save that out, and now that's ready to go. Let's do another refinement. Let's say that the user is admin, and we'll get that. But what you may have spotted right now is that we are getting values, the labels for these things are lowercase. They are actually the raw parameters that's being passed to the filterer, and that's not really what we want. We want to be able to have something that is, for a start, language independent, and also that just looks nicer. So the way to do that is we come back to our macro here, and we start with a new param called phrases. And in this, we are going to set up an array of phrases that we can use. So we go into curly brace syntax, and then we've got an extra set of curly braces inside here. Now, the first one I want to deal with is this title here. So right now it's using, as I said, the filter field. That's no good. We want to replace that with the phrase title. So we identify that by saying key : title, and that refers to the label for the field. So where we have a key of title, we want to replace that with the phrase title and a colon as well. Let's close that off, and let's just check that that single one works. So when we refresh this, we should now see the phrase title together with a colon. So that's working well. Let's do the same for user. So key user, and this is going to be user. I know that there's a phrase called user : and we'll do the same for tags. There we go. Now we've also got the state, but I don't actually have a phrase for that, or I suppose I could use the visibility phrase. Let's try that. And then we've got post date, start, and end. So we've got start. So in this one, I'm not actually going to use a phrase because that's not something I need to show you. So we'll just say post date after, and then we'll have key of end, and this is post date before. So we'll just get rid of that trailing comma for now. And now we should see that anything that we pass in here is properly formatted. Now, the next one to work with, let's just check that our display value came through for this. So I want a post date that's after, this is what, May the 10th, 2021. So let's make sure we'll have 2021, April or March, whatever, March the 31st, 2021, go. Post date is after March 31st. So that's properly formatted, despite the fact that it's being sent through as a Unix timestamp. The last one I want to show you is this visibility, because I've got visible as here, so we'll just filter with that. But here, the text visible there is actually the name of the value in the database, which isn't language independent and might not be user accessible. So we need a way to replace that value with something else that is usable. Now, by default, you can't actually do that without some extra work. So we could say val, namely the value of visible, corresponds to let's say we'll just put that in so that we can identify it, and val of hidden would be hidden. Let's see if that works. So anytime we get val of visible, it should be replaced, right? But actually, no, it's not. And the reason for that is because we have to expressly tell the system if we want to replace a value with something else. And we do that by heading back into the filterer and going back to a method that we essentially just ignored earlier on, this getLookupTypeList. And what getLookupTypeList does is it allows you to specify the names of any filter fields whose values need to be looked up before they are displayed. So in this case, I want to make sure that state is looked up. So anytime we get a filter of state, then we will now take the value that's being returned as the filter value, but then look it up against something else, namely this list here. And if there's a corresponding version, then it will be replaced. So let's do that, and we should now see this with visible, there we go, with the exclamation marks. So let's change that to something sensible. So that would be the phrase visible. And we've also got a phrase of hidden. So let's put that one in too. And now we should find that we've got a language independent version here that corresponds actually to the values that we've got for the text here. So in fact, that one's not even there. So phrase hidden. Do we have a hidden phrase? Soon find out, won't we? Refresh this. I'm going to take off the title filter so that we've got everything by admin that's visible posted over after that. Now we've got 2 pages, so we should be able to switch to page 2, and you can now see that we have not passed the filter parameters through. So why is that? Let's go take a look at the template. The filter parameters are page params, and here we've got link params. That's a mistake. It should be page params. So let's set up our filter again. This time I'm going to use, as you remember, we can use IDs to search for users. Let's say user ID 3. Here we are. It's Mr. Spammer, but that's not going to give me multiple pages. So let's do that again. Let's have the user admin, the tags of, I want multiple pages, so we'll just keep with that. User is admin, and we should be able to switch over to page 2 now. And there we go. Q user is admin and page is 2. So just one more little tweak that we can make here, just to make your filter bar even better. Right now we've got this state field, and it's labeled as visibility visible, which seems like some ghastly CSS property. But it would be nicer, I think, to not identify your visibility as visible, but to just have it say visible. So we can do that quite simply by coming in here and taking the key for state and replacing it with not quite an empty string, but something that HTML will treat as empty. So I've just used a single space there. And so now the value for the key of visibility or state will just be an empty space. So now I get just like a single visible item, or I could change that in here to be hidden. And there we go. Let's take off hidden, take off user admin. So I think that's hopefully a good introduction to how to use the filterer. It's worth noting that right now the filterer is limited to the control panel, the admin control panel. While you could call it from the front end, the way that the filterer works is not really geared towards public searching, because it essentially allows you to deal with any field in the database, whether or not they've been properly indexed or whether they're designed for searching. So this is very much something that is limited to the administrator, who isn't going to overload their own server with lots and lots of incredibly difficult searches. So use with caution outside the control panel if you choose to, but if you have any content that you want to list in the control panel, then the filterer is a great way to add a bit more power to your list.